news that comes out. Probably Fire Emblem for me would
Mm.
be the next one of those types of games where I normally like to play it myself, but now that I'm a content creator, I want that first reaction.
Mm.
So like probably when the next Fire Emblem game comes out, I'll be like having to constrict it to only streams.
I will say that'll help me not burn out on it like I did on Three Houses my first time through.
Uh-huh.
But then again, hopefully it's a better game than Three Houses.
Yeah. Who knows? I'm here like
Weapon Triangle's back.
I'm hearing a lot of mixed feelings about it, but hopefully it fixes the problem that we have with Three Houses with the
Which is the writing is bad.
well, it's not the writing to me at least. I don't mind the writing. It's more just the grind of
Yeah.
spending so much time just walking around the monastery and not actually playing the game.
If they put me in a fucking school, I'm fucking breaking the cartridge. If I have to teach one lesson to one other unit, I'm breaking the cartridge.
I actually don't mind the teaching system that all that much. Like the lecture, and it's because they just they're just very quick.
Yeah.
I just hate the exploring monastery because it's like
it's like an expansion. So you haven't played very many other Fire Emblems, right?
I have not played any of them.
So this is basically an expansion of the fortress system in Fire Emblem Fates, where you built your own fortress, and you got to set up you could set up things that give you daily stuff that you can use, and you can also set up defenses so that people can raid your castle and you can defend it and you both get stuff from it. Which also leads to the most broken system in the game, which is the ability to get skills from other players.
Huh.
Which allows you to create the most broken archers in the world that have sniper and just so many skills geared to being critical hit machines. And then you just win the game because you have fucking sniper double attack or whatever the fuck it was. It's a very broken game as far as beating it. It's very easy to beat it as long as you can go online. Which I guess won't be a thing for very much longer.
Yeah, fair.
I have mixed feelings about the writing in 3DS and Onward game. Now the funny thing is I have not played anything before 3DS. But I have played Shadows of Valentia, which is a remake of a pre-3DS game. It's a remake of the third game? I don't remember.
That's the one that's on the Switch, right?
What?
Like, didn't they release one of the first?
No, they released
Fire
the very
Emblem
first
games?
one.
Oh,
the very first game had never actually been translated and localized to English. So they released the first game, finally localizing it on the Switch.
I
didn't play that one. I was going to buy it, and then I just forgot to. And it's a limited release. I think it's still available digitally.
Never get to have it.
I think it's available digitally, but I don't remember.
I do have it.
Forgot.
I have yet to play it though.
But yeah, I started with Shadows of Valentia actually. It's a good game. It's really nice. Path of Radiance and Radiant Dawn are incredible. Those are ones I could definitely play at some point. I have a GameCube. I have a very powerful and real and legal GameCube. And I could set that up pretty easy. Actually, it's kind of hard. So it's actually there. I remember finding the disc for Radiant Dawn online, and it was very hard to get it on my space. because it took a long time to get here. But I do want to play them though, because they have I've been playing Fire Emblem Heroes for like a long time, and I want my wonderful Nino. I desire my Nino. I need the Nino.
Yeah.
I think she's from one of those. I'm pretty sure.
I don't know how far back. Like, it'd be nice to kind of go back and play some of the earlier Fire Emblem games, because, yeah, my current only experience is Three Houses. But, yeah, the next thing in line is gonna be Engage, which I wonder with Engage, with the way that you can, like, summon, basically, the main characters from the other games, like...
Oh yeah, I saw that you can summon Celica from Shadows of Valentia, and I'm like, fuck yeah, Celica.
So I wonder if I go back and play those games, like, it would actually mean anything to me.
Maybe, yeah. I definitely recommend Shadows of Valentia. Yeah. I think Shadows of Valentia is probably the best one on the 3DS. But the one I enjoy the most is Fates. You know what I'm saying? Like, Shadows of Valentia is probably a better game, but I enjoy Fates more.
That's fair. Yeah, like... Honestly, that's probably my my personal opinion of Fallout 4 versus New Vegas. Is New Vegas is probably the better game, but I enjoy 4 more.
Yeah. And honestly, like, if you like Three Houses, you'll probably like the 3DS games just fine. They're not that
I just
dissimilar.
need to get my hands on a 3DS.
They're like basically very similar with slightly better writing, unless it's Shadows of Valentia, in which case the writing is like pretty significantly better. Like, you know, Shadows of Valentia has a really nice like emotional storyline. And Fates is just kind of funny. Awakening is a bit of a mess story-wise.
Yeah, I've heard some things about Awakening, like, nothing spoilery. Like, I haven't heard anything about the plot of Awakening. I've just heard that people are, like, have weird feelings about it.
Yeah, I mean, it's just a little weird. My favorite fucking part of Fire Emblem Fates, though, is the fact that so you get your units together, you get them married, you're dating or whatever, and then they go and have children in parallel dimensions that run at a faster time scale than our own, and then you can recruit the children that they make that they have as units.
So they're the clones from Star Wars. They age faster.
Well, they age
at a faster rate for the sake of us being able to see them grown up.
Yeah,
without their parents having to be old.
Kinda. That's the thing about Awakening, though. That Awakening is really, really engrossed in the lore of the franchise as a whole. Whereas Fates is completely separated from it for the most part. There's just like Three Houses is.
Yeah, and that's another thing. Go ahead.
I was going to go back to the other thing, so you say your thing first.
Yeah. That's another thing with me and the Fire Emblems is like the reason I played Three Houses in the first place was, well, first of all, it was like the first ever Fire Emblem game to release on a game system that I owned. Because I did not have a DS or a 3DS or anything like that. I did have a Game Boy, but I wasn't interested in those kinds of games back when I had the Game Boy. But like, so Three Houses was like the first official mainline game of the franchise to release on a console that I had.
Mhm.
So, and then I was a little worried, like, but I won't be caught up on the storyline or anything like that. And it's like, no, this is entirely separate. It's its own separate dimension. Like, it has nothing to do with any of the other Fire Emblems. You can
Well,
play it just fine without needing to know anything about the other Fire Emblem games,
I
which
don't
is
know
great.
that we know that actually. It might be connected somehow.
Maybe, but for the most part, like, I could
Yeah.
get into Three Houses
Fates is the
without
same
knowing
way.
a single, like, I could get into it without knowing a single thing about any of the other Fire Emblems. And that's just like a thing I have with games in general, is like, if it's a part of a franchise, I'm always worried that I might be just jumping in media res by playing a game out of order. That's
Yeah.
how I was with Skyrim. Like, when Skyrim released, I was like, oh no, I haven't played the other games. How am I gonna know what's happening in the story? And they're like, and then I googled it, and they're just like, no, it's its own thing. You don't have to play any of the other games to know.
Yeah.
Which is not the case with Assassin's Creed. Assassin's Creed, you do kind of have to know what's going on.
Except for Black Flag. I've been playing Black Flag without playing any of the other ones, and it's fine.
I guess. I'm more guess. I guess I'm just talking with, like, the Assassin's Creed, like, the modern day storyline. You kind of have to have an idea of what's going on. So I guess Black Flag does kind of stand on its own a little bit,
Yeah,
in
I
a
mean,
way.
even the modern day storyline is like, oh, there's like hints of like, oh, someone was here before you and was doing something, but you're a different person in the modern day entirely. So
yeah, like, and they do have for the other games, like 2, Brotherhood, Revelations, and 3 all have like a little video clip that, like, when you boot up the game, it just catches you up on what you missed in terms of the main plot. So you, like, I guess you don't technically have to have played any of the earlier games if you want to. That's actually how it was for me in Brotherhood, because Brotherhood was my first Assassin's Creed game, and it follows the plot line. So Brotherhood's an interesting one where both the modern day storyline and the, like, actual historical fiction storyline, they're both sequels to the previous one. We're in our current day and age, like, the historical stuff is no longer sequels, like, they're all standalone. The Ezio stuff is all, like, that's the one case of them actually having been sequels. And so, like, I played through Brotherhood, and, like, I have no idea who any of these characters are. And I guess I'm supposed to be sad that my uncle died. I guess I got to know him in the previous game.
yeah,
But yeah.
yeah. So Shadows of Valentia and what's it called? Fates both have separate stories, so you could use those as entry points very easily. But yeah, back to the kids from Fates thing. So it's actually different than what you're thinking. Worse, actually, because the kids are living their full lives. Like, they're living an entire life, like, in full, away from their parents. Like, the parents go away and then they come back and it's been years for the kid. So
they all grew up without parents?
Basically, yeah. Like, to an extent. Because the parents are with us fighting the war.
Like, but why? What motivation do these parents have to just, okay, we're just gonna jump into a parallel universe, do some baby making, and then we'll hop right back.
Here's the thing. They don't know. They don't know that these parallel universes run on a different time scale. So they come back and they're like, what the fuck? You really like there's literally like dialogue like, oh wow, you're growing up fast. It's been years.
Oh my god.
Oh god. And then you bring them to your world and you have them fight for you. And then you can fall in love with your friends' children. In fact, some of the few gay romance options for the main character are the children of your friends.
Oh my god.
But also Fire Emblem Fates is also the game where you can romance your siblings both by birth and by raising. You have to you gotta choose between your biologically related kin or the kin you were raised with.
Huh.
And you can date every single one of them, assuming you choose the gender that they like.
Interesting.
And also, each of them has an underage girl. Well, not underage, because they have specific dialogue to inform you that despite the fact that they act and dress like they're younger children, they are in fact 18 years old.
I see.
But I guess at least they're not 1,000-year-old dragons. You have to go further back in Fire Emblem for that.
Yeah.
All the way back to Fire Emblem Awakening.
Just that does remind me. There's
And yes, you can romance the child dragon that acts like a child in Fire Emblem Awakening.
So let's see. I'm just looking up real quick. I swear there was like one or two characters in Three Houses who's still underage post time skip, but I could be misremembering because Lysithea is 15 pre time skip, so she's 20 post time skip.
Is there someone that
And
fucking young?
Cyril is about the same age as her, so I guess not.
Really? I didn't think Cyril was that old. I thought Cyril was a child slave. Not a teenage child slave.
Let's see. Cyril. Yep. He's 14, 15 pre-time skip and 20 post-time skip.
That boy's a badassio. God. I hate Three Houses in a lot of ways. There's a lot of things about Three Houses I really fucking hate. And Cyril is one of them.
Yeah, like, he's... Yeah.
He's a child slave. Like...
And he's happy about it.
He's happy about it. He's very happy about it. Don't give him a sock, though, because it makes him go 3.
He hates when other people do his work.
Yeah.
Like, that's one of the things he hates.
That's his work. Which he does. Because he's a slave. But he also likes it.
He also loves Rhea.
Yeah, he loves Rhea. The enslaver.
Yeah. Ugh. Yeah. Like, playing through this game... Because when I first played through it, right, I played as the Blue Lions, and the Blue Lions are the ones that are like most closely affiliated with the church in terms of like their respective alliances. Like so basically like if you play through the Blue Lions route, the church is painted as like being the good guys, and the Empire is painted as being the bad guys.
Mm-hmm.
So my first playthrough, I was like, oh yeah, like go church. Hell yeah. The church is great. The church is awesome. I love Rhea. We gotta save her, because spoilers for the Blue Lions route, by the way, Rhea is kidnapped by Edelgard, and you have to like rescue her, and you eventually do. And there's not much beyond that. But yeah, like it was all like, oh, we've got to save her. Like Rhea is like she's our sovereign leader. Like we've just got to do it. There's no reason for me to dislike Rhea.
True.
And now, after having played through several different routes, I'm now like, the church isn't all that great, is it?
The church fucking sucks. My first playthrough was the Black Eagle, and as a person who's played a lot of Fire Emblem, when I see a demonic dragon, I know that's the bad guy.
Yeah. Now, that's something I wasn't as aware of. Because I just sort of saw it as like a sign of godhood.
So
like
in Fire Emblem, dragons and gods are basically interchangeable. Like all dragons are gods and all gods are dragons.
Yeah.
But dragons are very easily corrupted. And it's just like a theme. Like when a dragon gets corrupted, it turns fucking evil. And dragons almost always get corrupted.
That's fascinating, actually.
Yeah, Dragon or Fire Emblem Fates actually really goes in depth on it. Where it like really focuses in on how just like the immense power of being a god inherently corrupts you.
Yeah, that's pretty fascinating.
Yeah,
actually, yeah,
it's really cool because there's like a DLC paralogue, where the big dragon is evil and is big, and he's corrupting the bad guy of the story. But this DLC paralogue takes place. It's actually a prologue. It's not even a paralogue. It's a prologue. It takes place before the events, and someone hires a bunch of characters from Fire Emblem Awakening and brings them into the dimension of Fire Emblem Fates. They're actually some of the children from Fire Emblem Awakening, because Fire Emblem Awakening also has a system whereby you get characters together and then their children come and fight for you, but it makes slightly more sense and slightly less sense all at the same time. But yeah, so they're hired and brought into the dimension of Fire Emblem Fates by someone to fight the dragon and try to stop the corruption from happening. And then it turns out that the person who hired them is the dragon itself, but like the last of its humanity, or like, goodwill. Like it like separated itself. So yeah.
That's interesting.
It's so fucking cool. Fire Emblem Fates is so fucking cool, and it plays with such interesting ideas, even if it's a bit silly and very incesty.
Yeah.
A little bit pedophile-y.
I think, like all Fire Emblem games
are a little
have, they've all got these incest and pedophilia, and in the case of Three Houses, teacher-student romance.
It's historical accuracy. That's what it is.
Yeah, it's also just like popular tropes in Japanese media.
Yeah.
Like if you see a lot of manga and anime all happen to have these kinds of tropes. In fact, in the research that I was doing for my undergrad independent study, one of the books that I read, the topic, by the way, for those of who are interested, was basically female romance, like
you talking S-Class?
S-Class. Yeah, I'm not sure how many people are familiar with that term, but yeah, that was my research, was S-Class.
There's a really good
one
Hazel video on that people should check out. I'm trying to remember which video it is, but go ahead. It's the one. It's the one on Vlad Love, I think is what it was called. Anyway,
so one of the authors, there's a well-known author, Yoshia Nobuko, who, like, she was a well-known author on S-Class. It's pretty heavily suspected that she was a lesbian, though I don't think she ever officially came out sexually, like what her sexuality was. And unfortunately, we don't have access to a lot of translations of her work because her current living relative that owns the rights to her work is kind of ashamed of being related to someone who was in a relationship with a woman.
My closed captions were broken. Sorry about that.
Oof.
Yep, that's this whole entire stream.
Damn.
That's okay. They
now they're back.
They wouldn't have been good for this stream anyways, because they can't pick you up.
Yeah. But yeah, so there was this one that I did get access to called Yellow Rose. It's just a really short read, pretty cheap. You can pick it up on like Amazon. It's even digitized, so you can read it on Kindle. And it is a teacher-student romance. It's actually kind of so, like, the story goes, right? Both them female, by the way. The teacher falls in love with the student. I think I might be misremembering, but they kind of like have a thing for each other, and it is impossible to misinterpret that they are romantically in love. Like, people can try all they want to say, like, oh no, this is just girls being girls, and no, they're actually like infatuated with each other. But then I believe there was something to do with the girl's parents or something like that. And so basically the teacher is ashamed and breaks off the relationship and leaves for America, I believe. She leaves for America and becomes like a writer. And like a writer for a journal. Keep in mind, it's been a long time since I've read this book, so the facts are not in line in my head. But then the student that she was in love with eventually shows up to this place on like a tour or something. And there's like this moment of tension where like the teacher's like, should I reveal myself? Because the thing is, the teacher was the one who made the decision to break off the relationship. So it's kind of left the reader feeling like perhaps the student still had those feelings. And so if the teacher were to have revealed herself in that moment, like, hey, I'm here, by the way, it's possible they would have ended up together again, but she decides it's best not to, and so she just kind of stays behind her desk and stays hidden, and they don't see each other again, which happens to be a common theme for a lot of S-class stories, is they all tend to have a sad ending. It's like a fleeting romance, and then something happens and they don't end up together in the end.
Yeah, do you remember that one that Yuri manga I was reading this summer?
Yeah.
Yeah, that one basically really fits into that same kind of scheme. Except then, like, several years later, they meet up again and get back together. Like, that's the twist, I guess. I think,
yeah.
like, at the time, I thought it was, like, bad. Like, it was kind of disappointing, like, because you don't get to see you don't get to see the relationship very much.
Yeah.
But I think, looking back, I think it's like fitting into this, it's fitting into the genre, but it's like it's a response to the genre, rather, like the genre staples.
Yeah. And so here's like kind of the arguments I made in my independent research regarding S-class literature was kind of twofold.
Mm-hmm.
Number one is that there's this generalized idea that, you know, girls in their young adolescence are going to have, like, you know, emotions all over the place, and they'll probably become gal pals and, you know, want to do these things that are like what's the term, like impure, I guess, is kind of like, yeah, they might want to do these kinds of impurities by being together, but it's only a fleeting thing. Like, they eventually grow out of it. It's just a phase, and that's kind of the general acceptance of these relationships. And so, twofold. Number one, this is a way of normalizing it. Is like, you know, it's normal for girls to fall in love at some point. They just will eventually grow out of it. And number two, this is how women who are actually lesbians, you know, the ones that don't grow out of it, this is how they can actually get away with publishing stories like this and getting their own stories out there in the world, is by basically having the unhappy ending of them not being together in the end because it was a fleeting romance, and thus the publisher will happily publish it because it fits into, like, their idea of, like, well, you know, it's a fleeting thing. And basically it's a restrictive thing. It's like a box that the writer has to fit into, but it also gives the writer a lot of power behind the scenes. Like, they can kind of leave messages of how these aren't, like, these relationships are not unreal. Like, they actually, it's not just like girls being like, oh, let's have fun together, and let's just, because we're teens, we'll make out and have a fun little thing. It's actually like girls can actually have affection for one another in a romantic sense, and not all of them grow out of it, as is the case with like as it was the case with Yellow Rose, is the teacher still had those feelings in the end. Like she still had those feelings for her student. It's so like the message is that it's not a phase. But because they're not together, it's still allowed to be published.
Mhm.
Also, another fun fact is like floral flowers and floral like imagery is very common in S literature. In fact, the very term itself, Yuri, that we are familiar with to refer to like girl romance manga, Yuri, translates to lily. So like yeah, so this entire Yellow Rose is one of many different publications that were published that were written by Yoshia Nobuko, and all of them had some sort of floral schema with the title. And I just personally find it fascinating. Actually, I remember now, the entire collection is called Hana Monogatari, like flower stories.
Yeah,
like I said, it's hard to gain access to it because the person who currently owns the rights to publication of it does not want those to be translated. But yeah.
But yeah, if you've ever played Hyperdimension Neptunia and wondered why the support conversation stuff is called their Lily ranking, there's your sign. It's because it's gay.
Yeah. But yeah, if anyone was wondering just how gay I am, this was an entire year's worth of research that I dedicated to in college, was to this stuff before I even knew I was trans.
Yeah, I was about to say, I was literally going to say that.
Yeah, like it's a real egg moment. It's a moment of, oh god, wouldn't it be amazing to just like be a girl and fall in love with girls? Like, oh.
I can do you one as well. I wrote a paper on Two-Spirit in college. For those who don't know, that is Two-Spirit is a modern pan-Indian umbrella term that is based on a term used by one specific indigenous group whose name I'm not remembering off the top of my head. The use of the term is kind of iffy. I now know a lot more about it than when I wrote that paper. And it what I like to refer to them as these days is indigenous gender. I don't know if that's going to be picked up at any point, but it makes, because there's so many different types, and basically every tribe that has a tradition of a quote-unquote Two-Spirit has a different word for it, and we should be using specific terms. But if you're going to have to use an umbrella term, I feel like it should be something more general than Two-Spirit, which is a specific one and implies a specific kind of thing. Because not all people labeled Two-Spirit are non-binary. Some of them are simply trans or gay. Or effeminate. Some people are just effeminate. It's fine.
It's the metrosexual.
Yeah.
They're straight, cis. They just happen to like girly things.
That's
okay.
That's actually going to be a huge part of the paper that I'm going to be writing, which is why I'm not going to be doing a whole lot of streams this month. a huge part of the paper is going to be about how the term is so useless in a lot of ways, and why I refer to them as indigenous genders, because indigenous genders as a term really, it references their indigeneity, and references the fact that there are many of them, and this is a category, not a gender in and of itself. But yeah, that's gonna be like a huge part of the paper. So yeah, we'll see how it goes. I could talk a while about. Oh my god, I was reading some of because it's a historiography, so I was reading a lot of old articles on indigenous genders, and they use a term that I'm not going to use on stream because it's a slur.
Yeah.
And Twitch wouldn't catch it as a slur, but it is a slur. And they're talking, oh my god, they're talking all sorts of shit. They're talking about how they're a corrupting influence. They're talking, oh my, it's like there's one where so in the tradition of the one of them is talking specifically about the Winnebago tradition. So the Winnebago tribe, in the Winnebago tribe's tradition of the indigenous gender that they have, people are men who experience, to them, men who experience a blessing of the moon can thus become, the term that they use. It is sort of basically they take on all the jobs of a woman, and then they also do them better, which I think is kind of funny. The idea that of course a man could do a woman's job better. but they have the blessing of the moon, so like maybe that it's like a spiritual power as well. But there's a story in one of these papers of a person. I don't know what pronouns they would have preferred, because obviously it's so far back that they weren't caring, and obviously the Winnebago use a different language than English, anyways. So like, who knows? Yeah, I don't know the pronouns of Winnebago. I don't know.
Like our English restrictions on pronouns are.
Yeah. But this person gets a blessing on a vision quest. They're on a vision quest, and they get a blessing from the moon, which means that they are now, empowered by spiritually empowered to become a woman in most senses of the term. And they tell this to their brother, and their brother says, "If you put on the skirt, I'll kill you." And that broke my fucking heart. That shit. You hear about that shit today. You hear about that shit today, and like, oh god, it hit me harder than I expected it to. Yeah, this is in 1950s, by the way. This paper was written in the 1950s. No trigger warnings at all, or no carefulness with the language or care at all, really. But yeah, and this person was like still determined to do it too, because the thing about it is, like, if you receive the blessing of the moon and you don't do it, you will die. But like, that's what the spiritual side of it is. I feel like that's an interpretation of dysphoria. The way dysphoria kills, it doesn't it doesn't have to be like, oh, you die just out of the gods kill you because you didn't do the thing. Yeah, it's you come over with a dysphoria, you could get that dysphoria and you fucking unalive yourself. Yeah. So I was like, wow, this is like it's powerful shit.
You really should talked to my dad about a lot of this stuff because he, for those who don't know, is an anthropologist, and he's very fascinated with like he's done a lot of research regarding like gender in different cultures around the world. Like he's familiar with Two-Spear. I believe you could actually educate him on
At this point, probably.
on that.
Especially after I read all these books. Holy shit, like I have so many things to read still.
But yeah, like definitely get in contact with him on this kind of stuff because I think I feel like it's something that's on the edge of his interest. He always likes to like consider indigenous groups and like see what their customs are, and especially regarding gender and like gender roles. Like some indigenous groups have like where it's a matriarchal society, and like there was just like I don't know. He's talked to me a lot about this kind of stuff. So I just find it cool that you're kind of treading along a similar path. But yeah, if you want an anthropologist that knows his stuff, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I've been so that for this class, we've actually been doing reading a lot more anthropology than I've ever read in my entire life. Because that's like the thing in archaeology too.
Yeah.
Mostly archaeology, actually, now that I think about it. But anthropology and archaeology are so similar. It's
yeah.
The differences are only matter to anthropologists and archaeologists.
Yep.
But yeah, we've been doing a lot of reading on this, on like archaeology and stuff. So I know a lot more about that than I did before.
Yeah. And like, of course, my background in being raised by an anthropologist just kind of gives me this way of looking at the world, which is kind of interesting. I don't think I applied any of that to my research because in my research topic, it was specific to like the it was a specific idea within an imperial group. Yeah, welcome to 3 a.m.
Yep. We've been talking for a fucking hour.
We've been in podcast mode.
We should just make a podcast.
Yeah. But yeah, it was it's like a specific like within an empire who wants to homogenize their identity. That's kind of what I was working on. So, but within the cultural sphere of Japan, we also have like various different indigenous groups that have their own things. Like we've got the Ainu, and we have the
Ryukyuan, yeah.
Yeah. Who are both like very distinct from what's the actual like term?
Yamato,
yeah. They're very distinct from that. But of course, Japan being an empire and like you kind of have to like push this patriotism and nationalism, nationalism mostly, by basically saying we are all one and therefore we should all be together.
Yeah.
And so you kind of have to erase those groups of those indigenous groups that have their autonomy. But you have to take away their autonomy and basically be like, we are a homogenous society. There is no there is no Ainu, there is no Ryukyu, there's just Yamato, and we are strong enough to stand up to the Western powers.
Yeah,
in fact, we could probably overpower them if we wanted to.
The right wing of Japan even will talk specifically about a Yamato race.
Yeah,
it's really weird. Yeah, and Ryukyu obviously is just like an island that they took over in the Imperial era. But Ainu is like particularly interesting because the mainland Japan used to be all people who were very similar to the Ainu.
Yeah.
Until the Yamato people came and established their place in southern Japan, and then eventually went on to exterminate. And I do mean exterminate. They literally went on extermination campaigns to remove the northern barbarians, essentially. Up to the coast of mainland Japan, and then the Ainu are basically the only ones left. Now, to be fair, when you go on an extermination campaign, you don't actually kill everyone. Sometimes you adopt them forcibly. And so there is like a mixture in the bloodline of the so-called Yamato race.
Yeah. Like, basically they're whenever you're talking about any kind of race, there like homogeneity is a myth.
Yeah. Do you know how
physically impossible?
Do you know how many Arabic people? Do you know how many Arabic people are in the bloodlines of every single European because of how many child slaves they were fucking?
Yep.
Shit's awful.
Like if you're like people who get on about race and racial superiority are very unaware of just like you're only talking about melanin. Like that's all you're talking about. It has nothing to do with lineage.
There's literally
because your lineage is very fucked.
There's literally 6 different genes that determine like skin color. And that's mostly what people are talking about, because there's like general facial structures in some of the, I'm using finger quotes here, but you can't see because I don't have a live motion yet. The races, quote unquote. And so, but those are like fluid, you know. And it mostly comes down to the skin color, and that there's like 6 different genes that control all of that.
Yeah.
And that's it. Also, I think Fire Emblem fell asleep, which is good because I was tired of that music.
We need like a just chatting music or something.
Yeah, but I'm not gonna, because that shit gets claimed so easy.
You could make it, but you're too busy with grad school.
Fucking busy.
Yeah.
But going back to Ainu though, it's interesting because the Ainu are not just we're not just like stuck in Hokkaido, or I can't remember the name that they call it. I would prefer to call it that, but the Hokkaido is the one that I know in my brain.
Yeah.
And the other one has been lost, unfortunately. But they were not just like stuck there. They were, first of all, they were trading with Japan, but like people from like the Ainu people have like
it was known as Yeso. one of those.
Yeso. So yeah,
Yeah.
the people of Yeso have also like been a major part of early America. People from the ancestors of the Ainu, because remember the Ainu people are still there to this very day. They are still here.
Yep.
They have not gone away. But the the ancestors of the Ainu traveled by boat over to the Americas, and we have evidence of this because Ainu art and some art particularly in Alaska and down into Washington and Oregon, I think. Indigenous groups in that area and in the Ainu art have like a lot of similarities. Particularly if you've ever seen like the like bone skeleton art of like native Alaskans. Like that's something Ainu do as well.
Yeah.
So it is there's like, I mean, there's a lot of crossover in like so a lot of people. I guess one thing I should make clear though is there's a big cultural understanding. There's a big cultural memory of the first people in America crossing over from Siberia into Alaska over the Bering Strait as a big land bridge because of ice and the withdrawing of the ocean. That is not how the first people who reached America got here.
Really?
The first people who came to America came before the land bridge ever formed.
Oh.
They go back so far that the land bridge had not even formed yet.
That's fascinating.
And they came by boat. They traveled up Siberia, or from you don't even have to go up to Siberia. You can go from Hokkaido to all those islands there, the Sakhalin and the Aleutian Islands. Make a pathway that you can go across where it's not too rough a water, and you can reach the coast of America. And then from there, you can take your boats down the entire coast. And some people did that very thing. We have evidence of people all the way down in modern day Venezuela before the land bridge ever forms.
Oh my god.
Yeah.
That's fascinating.
For those who don't know, Venezuela is at the fucking south of South America.
Yeah. That's really amazing.
It's not those very south, because that would be Chile and Argentina, but yeah, it's but yeah, and we also have some suggestion of Polynesians traveling as well, from the other direction, from the south. But that's not as solid as the evidence of people traveling, because the easy part to understand is that we find evidence of people, and the archaeological, like the radiocarbon dating shows that it is old.
Yeah.
It's not as easy to tell where it comes from, and that mostly comes from similarities to other cultures.
Yeah.
But yeah.
But yeah, that's really interesting, because like the way that's just kind of assumed how human migration happened is like we originated in Africa, and then we just spread
by
like wherever we can walk, we walked. I never really took into account the fact that we have technology, like boats. People make boats and can sail places.
Yeah, like basically as soon as they're able to, people are sailing wherever the fuck they can go.
Yeah.
I mean, hell, before they're able to, people are sailing wherever the fuck they can go.
True.
they try shit.
Yeah. Yeah. it's really cool, and yeah, it's also really cool to break down one of those myths that up until now I believed.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like basically at this point in the scientific understanding, the idea of the Bering Strait ice bridge is basically debunked.
Mm-hmm.
It's not even taken seriously anymore. Like it's not it's not a theory anymore. It's just rejected.
Mm-hmm.
Like we have such solid evidence. In fact, the only thing that could happen now is to make it even older, that people have reached America.
Uh-huh.
In fact, it's actually funny. The remains of people who lived in America are so old that the radiocarbon dating starts to get messy, because it's going back far enough to a point where there was more carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. And so there was more carbon dioxide in the remains of things.
Oh my god.
So they're actually probably older than our radiocarbon dating suggests. We have to like adjust it by like guesstimate, by like we have to obviously it's not guesstimate. We're like taking a look at what the atmospheric level was and trying to create a formula that tells us how much we need to adjust by.
That's
fucking staggering.
Wow. Yeah.
Also, while we're breaking Indigenous American myths, Indigenous Americans are not the reason why mammoths went extinct in America. The reason why mammoths went extinct in America is because the Ice Age ended.
Yeah.
The Ice Age ended, or what was ending, and as a result, there was a bit of a thaw, and this meant that the plants that mammoths relied on were not growing in as large a number, so they were dying from starvation, and maybe they would have adapted, but then they were all killed.
Yeah. Yeah.
You like, and the thing about starvation is starvation also breeds disease. Starvation weakens immune systems. Which actually I'm gonna break another Indigenous myth, and it's gonna come back to this fact as well. Yeah, starvation breeds disease, and then when you add hunting on top of that, it was just too much for them. But the death of the mammoth opened up a ecological niche for bison. So the reason why bison were so plentiful is because the mammoths got killed off.
That's interesting. Yeah.
Of course, there's actually two reasons why bisons were plentiful. And I guess I'm just busting all the indigenous myths. Because the other reason why bison were so plentiful is because indigenous people specifically planned it that way.
Oh.
It was a pseudo. It was not like a domestication in a European sense, but there was a maintenance of the land in order to provide room for the bison to prosper.
Yeah. That part. So that specific detail I wasn't familiar with, but I was aware that like peoples in that area that heavily relied on bison as their way of survival took good care of their bison, like made sure that that herds could survive and thrive.
Yeah, because
if it doesn't, then your people die off. So you've got a kind of symbiotic existence where like you have to ensure that one species survives, because if it doesn't, then yours won't.
Yeah, and like bison need for the bison to live, it needs a wide open field, you know. But wide open fields don't naturally grow, really. It requires for a wide open field to stay a wide open field, it needs to constantly burn, essentially. Because otherwise trees grow, and trees do not make wide open fields.
Yeah.
So what indigenous people were doing was clearing more and more land, and making these huge wide open fields, like for, you know, hundreds of miles wide. Like, and so that's why the bison population was massive when Europeans arrive. Additionally, it's partially because the other reason why the population was so large by the time the Europeans got there is that by that point, a lot of indigenous people had died by disease. And so there weren't as many people hunting the bison. So their population was able to explode in these fields that had been cleared, but would then no longer be cleared after a certain point, you know? Like it wasn't long enough for the field to be reclaimed by the forest, but it was long enough for the bison to superpopulate. Now, of course, the indigenous people were not all dead either. There were plenty of them left. And in fact, not all of them had the disease was actually not doing as much as it has been said in popular history. Here's the other thing I'm going to debunk. Disease was not as huge a killer of indigenous people as Jared Diamond would have you believe. Disease, of course, killed a lot of indigenous people. But why is that? Because, you know, Europeans would get diseases too. So Europeans were not immune to smallpox. Some of them were, but a lot of them weren't. And the reason why it hit the indigenous people so hard is because at the time of European contact, well, no, let's not call it contact. European invasion. At the time of European invasion, the Little Ice Age was starting. And the Little Ice Age caused droughts. So there was mass starvation all across America, right at the same time that the fucking Spanish are bringing their fucking smallpox pigs.
So it's not that. So yeah, it's not that their immune systems weren't adjusted to the diseases that the Europeans were used to. It was more a factor that just like they were dealing with starvation, which weakened their immune system, and therefore they were more susceptible.
They also were you know, vulnerable to European diseases because they hadn't been exposed to them. That part is true.
Yeah, that is, yeah, but
it's a combination of factors.
Yeah. It's not just we've never seen smallpox before, therefore we're gonna die. It's like it's a wombo combo.
Yeah. So like the Europeans come at the worst time. Like it is a terrible time. It is very cold. Have you ever been to Florida in the winter?
I have. I don't know. Probably. It's been a long time since I've ever been to Florida.
Have you ever been to the Southeast in the winter? How about that?
It's been a long time since I've ever been. I can't remember the last time I did. I think it was during the summer though. So yeah.
That's actually weren't you here? Weren't you with me last year?
Yeah, that was during the summer.
It was pretty chilly then, right? Like for a southeastern climate, pretty chilly.
Yeah, it was.
Yeah, imagine if global temperatures were all decreased by, you know, a couple of degrees. So these Spanish people are arriving to Florida. At Florida is the coldest it's ever been. So these people are from fucking Spain, and they're coming to Florida, and they think Florida is going to be, they're calling it a new Andalusia, which is a region of Spain. They think they're coming here trying to grow fucking grapes, and they're hit with the biggest blizzards of their entire lives. They're coming in winter for some fucking reason. And, Hernando de Soto is coming through. He's coming through Florida. Obviously, other ones, Pizarro went further south. But Hernando de Soto went to Florida, La Florida. And he brought with him a shit ton of pigs. Just like an absolute shit ton of pigs. Because the Spanish people refused to eat indigenous food. This is actually the one thing I'll give Christopher Columbus. He ate the indigenous food, which is more than I could say for any Spaniard colonizer.
And this really does sound a lot like just like a lot of colonization. Just like, no, fuck you. I'm gonna eat
fuck your stuff.
My stuff.
I'm gonna bring my pigs all the way over here.
Yeah.
So the thing is, like, so the Hernando de Soto moves through, and he goes all the way from La Florida. Basically, I think he ends up in Texas eventually, with modern day Texas. And all along the way, they're carrying their pigs, and their pigs are leaving. Indigenous people are fucking starving because there's a huge drought. And it's only going to get worse from here. This is the very start of the Little Ice Age. And, they're coming through with their pigs. Now, the thing about pigs is that these are not like modern day pigs. Modern day pigs have been bred even more than they were then. These pigs are fucking nasty, and they're fucking they're fucking hard to kill, and they're fucking up everything. So pigs are actually destroying, indigenous crops and shit.
Oh my god.
And the pigs carry smallpox with them and other European diseases. Because pigs are carriers for smallpox.
Yeah.
And that's how the majority of people who get sick in this first wave get sick. It's not from actual Europeans. It's from the goddamn pigs.
Huh.
Now, as we continue down the timeline, more and more Europeans come. But like the thing about disease is that in this early age, where there's a lot of travel in indigenous communities, like a surprising amount of travel. We see trade all the way from Aztec Empire all the way up to North Carolina. We're hell, the fucking Iroquois are like importing, and that's not actually the name for the Iroquois. They have their own name. That's just the popular name that we have for them because the French fucking came up with it. But the Iroquois were importing like obsidian from the Aztec Empire and shit. Anywhere where corn showed up, there was some form of trade that reached all the way to Aztec Empire. Because not necessarily the Aztec Empire, more like the Toltec people who were an empire in quotation marks before them. I would definitely not put quotation marks around the Aztec Empire, although it was 3 city-states, but it was very imperial in scale. But so like corn, as we know it, was cultivated in Mexico, or modern day Mexico, and it spread through trade all the way up, to the like northern New England, like across the continent diagonally, and anywhere where corn went, there was trade networks that connected things all the way back to the Toltec, and it wasn't for corn, it was for all sorts of things. And corn happened to follow along that trail once it was developed. Now there's also all sorts of different types of corn, but I'm not going to get into that. Like at this point, there's different varieties of corn for different things, and none of them are like the corn we eat today.
Yeah.
This shit you can't just eat straight off the cob. You gotta grind this shit or like soak it in poison acid to make it edible. That's called hominy, by the way. You soak it in ley, or lye, not lay. You soak it in lye,
Mm-hmm.
which you make by like burning wood in a specific way. The Cherokee have been doing it for a long time, and they passed that, or that tradition was stolen by white people in the Appalachians, and is a very popular dish amongst Appalachian folk.
That does bring up something that I like. I've always been interested in is kind of like, how did people find out that this stuff is edible in the first place? If you can't just eat it straight, then how do you like even like experiment to find these different ways to make it edible?
Yeah, I mean, so like the indigenous people have been like before the cultivation of corn. Indigenous people were obviously hunter-gatherer groups, but they were also cultivating things. But what they were cultivating and gathering was seeds, and seeds is a thing that you also have to grind.
Yeah.
So basically what happens is they just started cultivating a plant until it became maize.
Huh.
So they were already in the process of grinding shit to make it, and like they picked like the ones to cultivate that are the better for grinding and stuff.
Interesting.
Yeah, but yeah, basically, so like there's these huge trade networks, but there's still not a whole lot of physical movement between them. It's you trade with this tribe, that tribe trades with this tribe, that tribe trades with this tribe. If you need to move, you move, but you're not interacting with other tribes when you do so. You're just trying to find your own new land, and that does happen quite frequently. There are several groups who will find distaste with the land they're on and move to find a new land, and they do that. But yeah, as the little ice age like ramps up and more Europeans are coming as well, conditions get worse as far as food, and the Europeans come along with their diseases, and the diseases start wiping out people before the Europeans get to them, but it only reaches so far. In fact, guns are being spread further than disease is at this point. So like there's huge trading networks for guns, which is why eventually the Apache and the Comanche are like these huge like raiding groups that have lots of guns and lots of horses before the Americans even get there to like fight them. Like they were trading with indigenous groups who were trading with indigenous groups who were trading with Europeans to get guns. And they've been doing that for so long that they had mastered the art of the gun and the horse, which they were also trading for. Although not always, because when Spanish control like left Mexico after the Mexican Revolution, a lot of horses got free. There was just like a shit ton of horses that got free and like started living wild in America, and that's where a lot of like southwest like western tribes got their horses from. But yeah, like so like the disease actually spreads with as Americans move west, the disease like kind of moves with them, but never to the extent like the western side of the continent isn't wiped out by the time Europeans get there, It's not been ravaged by disease by the time Europeans get there. I mean, it was ravaged by Spanish people.
Yeah.
It was ravaged by Spanish people who were trying to avoid. It's like here's the funny thing is like the Spanish people go so far north because they're afraid of Russians. The Russians colonized Alaska. And word got back to Spain that this was happening, and so they're like, we gotta seize all of California before the Russians get there. And so they just kept pushing north. So like basically by the time of western like America moving to the southwest, the only places that have been untouched by European, like untouched in like a very direct sense, I mean, by European people, is like the Northwest, not including Alaska, or even British Columbia to an extent.
I want to get back to what you're talking about with the gun trade.
I have a whole book on that I could share with you.
Because that's another thing that's fascinating to me. Like there's a lot of myth with not just Europeans interacting with the indigenous people of the Americas, but also, of course, the myth of the easier to debunk myth of the Europeans interacting with the Japanese when it comes to guns. But like this idea of like when colonization was occurring, that it was basically just people whose only weaponry was literally just like sticks and clubs and bows and arrows against people with guns, and never stood a chance. Like that's the general myth when it comes to colonization of the Americas, is like we just had superior technology and they just couldn't stand up to us.
Yeah, no, indigenous people like abandoned the bow and arrow to a large degree by like really early on. I mean, the Iroquois became as powerful as they were because they were trading with the French for guns, and the Dutch. Dutch was actually a really important part of the gun trade because the Dutch could not control their traders. All of their merchants were trading guns left and right because guns were what people like the indigenous people wanted the most.
Yeah,
like you can trade like fucking beer for like a skin, or you could trade a gun for like 100 skins.
Yeah.
Now the thing about it though is that the indigenous people were like fully aware of like what power the gun held. And and also like we're becoming savvy of like European business practices as well. So they knew that they had to get like the best deal that they could, and they were picky. They were actually picky about guns. Like they weren't just like
interesting.
Like they wouldn't just take any old gun. They would like they would test the guns, make sure that they worked, and they would be like, this gun is too heavy. Can you make like a lighter gun? Because I'm going to be going hunting and I don't want this big ass gun to be slowing me down.
They were proper gun nerds.
Yeah, no, they really were.
They weren't like, oh, this boomstick kills things, I want it. They were like, no. Like, is this efficient? Like, what am I going to be using this for? What's the most efficient way I can, like... Can you give me something that fits my needs?
And like most importantly, how can I incorporate this into my current lifestyle?
Yeah.
Like I'm not going to live like a European because I like their guns, you know, because the gun is slightly better at killing people.
Yeah.
And at that point, it was really only slightly better at killing people. The thing about a gun is that you shoot it once and then you do something else for a bit.
Yeah, it took a while for us to develop guns to where you could reload them easily, or yeah, and also accuracy was an issue until rifling was invented. Like you kind of have to rely on close range if you wanted to reliably deal a killing blow with a gun.
It actually, the way indigenous people actually found ways around this too, because obviously they would request shorter guns to make them more efficient, like, you know, and more like more weight efficient. But they would also like they like, innovated with them too. Like they created powder horns that were sized for one shot. So you didn't have to waste time sizing it. You just poured it in, and then they would carry the bullets in their mouth. Now these are lead bullets, so they were gonna die of lead poisoning. But at this time, it doesn't really matter. You're not gonna reach that age.
Yeah.
So they were carrying all this poison in their mouth, and they would put in the shot, spit in a bullet, and then ram it down, and boom, you're good to go. So you could get 2 shots in before you go into melee, and they would do like a shot and go into melee. Like it would basically be like a stun tool.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah, like they mathed this shit out and then labbed it out. It was really like they weren't slacks with this stuff, you know.
Yeah.
And this is also
not the myth.
Like you were talking about rifling, you know.
Yeah.
This is why indigenous people don't adopt rifling immediately. Because with rifling, you have to have a very specific bullet. To use a rifle, you need a rifled bullet. So you can't just, make your own bullets by getting a big hunk of lead and using the lead chamber.
Yeah.
So you can't shape bullets the way you want to and then spit them in the gun. So because of that innovation that they made, they actually didn't want rifled guns for a while.
Yeah.
It's like,
that makes sense.
Fuck the accuracy. I'm going to be shooting this at pretty close range anyways, because we're using this for like surprise raids.
Yeah.
We come out of the woods, we shoot, and then we hit them with our clubs.
And this is all very fascinating because it's like breaking down the myth of like indigenous peoples just like, oh, we're like, we can help us and we'll just accept anything the Europeans have because they're technologically superior. Like, no, they were actually innovating with the stuff that they got and like making, like, they get guns and then they fit them to their own uses and make them better in their own way. Like, because you have to remember, like, we're not just like Europeans versus indigenous people. We are like all one species, and like the entire species of Homo sapiens is kind of like built around the use of tools and improving upon them. And like, so they have that same instinct that the Europeans did.
And in another way, we're also not indigenous people versus Europeans, because what we actually are is Iroquois versus Winnebago versus Dutch versus English versus French versus all these fucking people hate each other.
Like different Europeans were trying to race each other for colonization because they had rivalries with each other, they were at war with each other, and then of course like the indigenous people themselves had their own like different factions, different alliances and rivalries that is very complex and is not just like a two-sided ordeal.
So yeah, like the Iroquois, the Iroquois were suffering from massive plagues, and they were losing a lot of people. And a part of the tradition of the Iroquois is a thing called the mourning raid, with the U, like as in like mourning the loss of someone. And what these are is you after you have massive losses either by war or by disease, you go and raid another tribe and you forcibly adopt everyone you can catch.
Oh wow!
To replenish your numbers.
And
they basically do this, like they get the guns from the French, or they get the guns from the Dutch, and the French fucking hate it because the French are like, why are we giving these people guns? They're just going to use them to kill us. And the Dutch are like, I can't stop the traitors from doing it. And the French are like, well, stop them. They're going to kill us. But what they use the guns for is to raid the Huron and the Wyandot people and steal their people away from them. Now, eventually, the Huron and the Wyandot begin trading with the French and getting guns to protect themselves. And they start raiding the Iroquois, like in retaliation. So, like, eventually, the Iroquois has to stop raiding north and start raiding south. And then eventually, the southern people get guns, and they have to kind of stop raiding entirely.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's basically
like
an indigenous arms race that happens whenever guns are introduced.
That's really cool. Like
it gets not cool in the Southeast. It gets extremely not cool in the Southeast. Because that's where the English are.
Yeah.
And the English are very big traders. They love trading, just like the Dutch. But unlike the Dutch, like the Dutch dabbled in a little bit of slavery. But the English fucking love slavery. Oh, they can't get enough of slavery. They need as many. They need so many slaves to handle all these fucking plantations that they're making.
Yeah.
And African slavery wasn't really established at a high level yet. African slaves were going to South America because they were highly valued.
For context, what's the time frame we're talking right now?
So this is like Virginia colonies. Like we haven't separated out. Like the Dutch are still here. The Dutch haven't left yet.
Gotcha.
In fact, it's very funny. Once the Dutch are out, the English think they can like establish a monopoly, and then they cannot. And then the Spanish leave, and they think they can establish a monopoly, and they cannot. And the French leave, and they think they can establish a monopoly, and they cannot. Hello, Tack. It is going well. We're in podcast mode. I have been for like 2 hours.
Yeah.
So yeah, at this point, African slaves are not at such a high. It's not at such a high level yet. Mainly because the Portuguese have such a big monopoly on it. And African slaves bring a very high value. So they're very expensive. And you don't use expensive slaves in Virginia because Virginia is a fucking terrible colony.
Yeah.
And people are dying all the goddamn time there.
So you want the cheap labor that is a short-term investment.
Yeah. In fact, when England does establish a trade, what are we on about? We're talking about history, specifically indigenous history in the Southeast right now. And
this
actually,
all
right
started,
now,
by the way, a chain of discussion starting with just talking about Fire Emblem.
Yeah, because Fire Emblem loves slavery.
Yeah.
But yeah, so. When England eventually does establish their own slave trading company in Africa, the Royal African Company, the Royal Africa Company rather, the Royal Africa Company actually doesn't want to trade to Virginia. Like they think it's a waste of time. They're like no, we're sending these people, or we're sending this people that are now property to Jamaica, where they're going to make a shitload of money, and the people who make the shitload of money can actually pay us. You are not able to pay us as well. Like your shit's going to fail any day now.
Your credit score is very low.
Exactly, it's literally a credit score issue. They won't lend them the credit to trade with them. They have to like make promises and shit to get the slaves. So at this point, that shit hasn't been established yet. And so the Europeans are like desperate. The English in the Southeast are desperate for slaves, and they don't have a good way to get them.
Yeah.
So indigenous people have a practice of capturing slaves.
Mhm.
Most indigenous groups had a practice much more similar to Roman practices for capturing slaves. You know,
Uh-huh.
in a war, you capture
Yeah.
people and you enslave them.
Mhm.
Now, it's not like Romans in that oftentimes there would not be an opportunity to become a not slave. Sometimes there is. It
Okay.
depends on the
Hmm.
group and it depends on how long it's been. It
Mhm.
really depends.
Yeah.
This is one of those ones where like we're talking about so many different groups. It's hard to
Yeah.
make statements.
Uh-huh.
But most indigenous groups had a type of slavery. Some of it was chattel, like people who are born from slaves stay slaves. Some of it was
Mhm.
non-chattel, where it's like you're a slave for life, but your children won't be slaves. And some of it
Mm.
was you're not a slave for life. You can earn the right to become a real person. And some of it
Mm.
was forced adoption, as we mentioned earlier, where you become a
Yeah.
full citizen, but you cannot go back to your home people.
Mm.
You know, you're like a forced citizen of the place. Um,
Yeah.
but you know, being a family relative does allow you certain privileges that being a slave does not. You know,
Yeah.
so and in the indigenous society, it's not like a big deal to sell slaves. Like you capture them, so you can do what you want with them. So the
Yeah.
Europeans are buying the slaves from the Native American people and trading them, you know, things that Native people want. And one of the big
Mhm.
things Native people want is guns. That's like the biggest thing they want.
Yeah.
So there becomes a massive slave industry in the southeast where the English people are selling or trading guns for slaves. Now you can also harvest pelts. If you go and hunt pelts, you can get enough
Mhm.
pelts to get a gun, but it's 100 pelts to a gun, and it's
Mhm.
one slave to a gun. In the same amount
Mm.
of time that you can hunt all those pelts, you can capture tons of slaves.
Yeah.
And if you get enough guns from capturing slaves, you can capture more slaves.
I use that logic in games all the time.
So
Like
essentially,
I can it like it's a matter of like efficiency because like say in Skyrim I could just plant and harvest wheat and wait for it to grow and make virtually infinite money that way, but it's not virtually infinite time. Well, it's a lot faster to like, do other stuff that
yeah,
gets you money faster.
yeah. So essentially, there become these like slave trading empires of indigenous people who raid other indigenous people. So that's the thing, is that like indigenous people don't see themselves as the same, you know.
Yeah, there's no like us or them. Well, there is an us or them, but it's like
It's not indigenous people
it,
versus Europeans.
yeah, it's
The Iroquois
because
see themselves as a distinct people from the Huron, you know.
and frankly speaking, like their relationships with their like with their neighboring tribes have much deeper roots than their relationships with the Europeans do. So
Mhm.
like
So
there might
if
be
you hate another
long-term,
tribe,
yeah, there
you're
might
gonna
be
fucking sell
long-term
them into
bad
slavery.
blood. Whereas Europeans are just like random white people who showed up and like
Have
you
stuff you
have
want.
no connection to them, but they have guns.
Yeah,
And you can use these guns
and like
against these people that you hate.
a thing about a lot of indigenous societies at this time is that trading is actually a not just a economic bond, but like a diplomatic and like uh,
Yeah.
it, almost
Uh-huh.
familial bond. Like
Mm.
if you are engaging in trade, you are brothers, you know.
Mm.
So like, but that doesn't mean that they're like going to get scammed. If you're trying to scam an indigenous person, they're going to call you out on it and say you're not acting very brotherly right now.
Mm.
And like, so like they're expecting like gifts and stuff because you give gifts to your brother, you know.
Yeah.
and so the Europeans actually like have to start basically giving tribute to indigenous tribes to keep them happy in certain time periods, especially the French, because the French have a very
Amazing.
limited military presence in America.
Uh-huh.
So they're like the Choctaw are like pressuring the French to give them gifts of guns at a certain point. Like, it's not very brotherly of you to not give us like a gun. And
Yeah.
and another thing that they're asking for is gunsmiths, because you need someone to fix those guns. So like one thing they'll ask for is like, okay, well, we'll establish trade with you, but if we do this, you have to provide us with a gunsmith that lives on our land on a permanent basis and gives us services for free. And they do it. Like they do it quite often. And so these tribes have like permanent gunsmiths.
Now, I have a question about this, like, expectation of like brotherly gift giving. So they expect the Europeans to give gifts to show like their friendliness and brotherhood. What, like, does the inverse happen too? Like,
well, they're letting them stay on their land.
Ah, okay. So it's kind of like a lease.
In a way, like it's nothing so contractual, you know. But like they let them stay on the land. They ally with them. They fight wars for them. Like if the French ask the Choctaw to go fight some people that they want them to fight, the Choctaw will say, "Yeah, we'll fucking fight them. We're brothers."
Okay. Yeah. So it's not as tangible of a gift, but it's like they're still giving something as a show of their brotherhood alliance.
Yeah, and there's also like trade of food as well. Like Europeans would not fucking survive if not for plenty of trade and gifts of indigenous food. Like the Europeans are just really fucking bad at feeding themselves.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's there's like just like a lot of factors going on, and so you end up with these like I said, these massive slaving empires. I mean, that's what the Apache and Comanche were doing too. Like everywhere the gun frontier. That's what it's called in the book Thundersticks. If you want to know my source for this information, most of it comes from the book Thundersticks. A very good book. I suggest reading it. If you want my source for the Royal Africa Company, you can go and read Saltwater Slavery. But yeah, for all this stuff about the gun stuff, that Thundersticks is the book. And in the book Thundersticks, it is described as a gun frontier, basically a frontier area where guns leave European hands and enter into indigenous hands, whether through trade with indigenous people, like through trade by Europeans or trade by indigenous people. So yeah, and most of the way that they pay for these is through slaves. Now, of course,
very fascinating.
That's not the case all the time, because over in California, because this is actually a really interesting thing. People were going to were in California before anyone moved like all the way from East Coast to the West.
Yeah.
Like Europeans were in California then.
Yeah, like that's part of like the
even English people, like
yeah,
like they were going and they were trading with China there. And one of the most valued things in China is sea otter pelts. Sea otter pelts were used to trim the robes of Chinese royalty. So they were extremely highly valued. And one of the best people at harvesting sea otter pelts were indigenous people on the American coast of California, Washington, Oregon, and Alaska. So the Russians were doing a lot of trading for sea otter pelts in Alaska, but in California there was lots of trade by English people and Spanish people with indigenous groups like well before Europeans had actually reached that point of colonization, and they were trading
Now,
guns.
I do have a question. So the European presence in California, like, how permanently did they establish residence there, and how did they continue, like, movement of people and, like, presumably connection to their home, like their
Do you mean in this time
place of
period that I'm
origin?
talking about right now?
Yeah, because we don't have a canal in Panama.
Yeah.
Presumably, I'm guessing they traveled maybe either by river or by land.
No, they are traveling by boat. They are going around the Horn of Africa or around the Horn of South America.
So they're just
these are-
like going the long way.
Yeah, these are trading vessels. These are not colonial efforts. They are not establishing permanent residence. They are establishing trading ports. And the port is owned by the indigenous group that's there. I don't remember the name of them off the top of my head. Read the book Thundersticks. Go read it. But essentially, the indigenous people create a port for the Europeans to dock at.
Huh.
And become a trading port. And the indigenous people that are here they're also controlling trade. So obviously lots of people want the guns. And people are coming from all around to trade with the Europeans. But the group that owns the port are controlling who is allowed to trade there. Like, well, they're the only ones allowed to trade there. But, you know, if you trade us your goods, we'll trade them to the Europeans and get you something. But we get the skim off the top. And they basically they have, like, you know, it also means that they get to control the political power that comes with that too, you know. But yeah, it's like a whole thing.
Yeah.
And like I said, there's no permanent establishment here. In fact, like at a certain point, the indigenous group there, like, feels like they're being cheated by a group, and they raid the boat and just steal everything from the boat. And they do this like a couple of more times and just like steal everything from the boats that are coming. And then nobody comes there again because they keep getting their boats stolen.
Yeah.
And the people die. So like they're like, oh well, don't go there anymore. So they like completely lose all that political power that they had. And by the time this happens, guns are starting to come from the other side. So like people further east are starting to amass political power through gun trade. And so now they have to answer to them instead of the other way around. It's so interesting. It's such an you get a lot of interesting stories when you actually like take a look at some areas you haven't thought of in time or in time periods you haven't thought of.
Yeah. It's really fascinating just how complex everything is compared to the watered down history that we're often taught in schools. Of like, and yeah, you really have to think of it as less of an one group versus another. It's multiple complex groups, some trading with one another, some allied with one another, some rivals with one another. And this is on kind of both sides. Both the Europeans and the indigenous peoples are experiencing this complex network of how exactly they relate with one group versus the next.
Yeah.
And also technology, because, yeah, like, guns are not often thought of as being in the hands of indigenous people, but they were.
Yeah, and like guns are not just weapons. They are in the hands of a state. They are pieces of political power. Because the way a state maintains power is through violence. Violence is power to a state, and that includes indigenous states. Like a tribe is no different in this way from a European nation. Violence allows for state control. The more more articles of violence that you obtain, the more you can establish a state control over things. So like as this occurs, like we see more centralization of some tribes. Like, I mean, the Apache and Comanche are like massive empires almost. Empire is a hard word here because they are so mobile. We don't usually think of empires as mobile. But we call Mongolia an empire, and they were just as mobile as the Comanche were. Maybe less so. Or more so? I don't know. You could go either way, really.
Yeah.
So, it's just a matter of perspective, and I think opening up that
perspective kind of depends on how you define an empire.
Yeah, and like I think Comanche and Apache could very well hit that mark. And we like to think of indigenous people as like perfect, peaceful, in touch with nature kind of things.
Yeah,
like, that's just not a reflective of reality in any way, shape, or form. Like, indigenous people were and are real human beings who have thoughts, feelings, and ambitions, just like any of us do. And one of the basest human ambitions is power and control. And whether that be control over your own life or control over other people, sometimes those little wires get crossed. And so
I think this whole story of basically everything in the Americas was just friendly until the Europeans showed up to colonize everything is in part a dehumanization of the indigenous peoples that live there, because it's like taking away the complexity and autonomy that comes with just being a human and very much having a society.
It very much is, because it is a very common trope to see indigenous people as part of the landscape. If indigenous people are part of nature, then it's just it's just civilization taking over nature, rather than human beings being conquered and taken over and massacred. And that's why we've kind of moved away in museums from depicting the life scenes, where we have the statue of the indigenous person in the dress, and it's like in a pose, and like there's a little scenery around it. We've moved away from that because that implies so much in the favor of empire. It's actually still a common practice in indigenous museums, because they like to see that. It's for one, it's like, it's kind of a comforting story, as that's just like one aspect of it. But also, I think that it's like what they are used to as representation. So like that's like traditional to them in a way. And so if you go to like you're an indigenous run museum, you might still find places like that, but they'll be heavily contextualized as well.
Yeah.
Because like a lot of times, like I've read about some that exist, and a lot of times what they do is you can't go in there without a guide to like explain the context of it.
Yeah. Makes sense.
Yeah. But yeah, it is no longer common practice to present things in that way because of how it serves empire and to soften the edges of colonization.
Yeah. Yeah, by painting this picture of nature and just like this untapped resource that the indigenous peoples just happen to be a part of, you're kind of taking away that humanity, you're reinforcing this imperial aspect of just like we are the ones with the autonomy and like the privilege to take this untapped land.
Yeah. And also it's just straight up wrong. Like as we've explained throughout tonight, which is like very fastly turning into a podcast. It's like literally 2 hours. Like that's a full podcast length and then some. As we've explained, like indigenous people were not peaceful. They had plenty of war in them. Indigenous people were not in tune with the land. They were controlling the land as much as Europeans do, but in different ways because they developed differently. They developed different methods of interacting with the land, whereas the Europeans, fenced in the land. Native Americans decided to shape the land to match what they wanted instead of creating a place that was no longer nature. They shaped nature to their whims.
Yeah.
And that's also true of like non-North American natives. The Amazon is the greatest terraforming project in the history of mankind.
Oh wow.
The Amazon rainforest was a terraforming project by indigenous people.
Really?
Yeah, at least to a large degree. Like the Amazon would not look the way it does today without indigenous people shaping it.
That's really fascinating.
Yeah, and now it's the fucking lungs of the world, as we call it.
Yeah.
Until Bolsonaro gets back into power someday and destroys the whole thing. Good luck, Lula. Good luck, Lula.
Yeah.
Please don't have another corruption scandal. Although there's like some evidence that maybe the Lula scandal was the corruption scandal was fake, but I don't know enough of the details on that to say anything either way. I can tell you though that the Bolsonaro corruption scandals are 100% real. So,
Yeah.
I mean, Bolsonaro worked with fucking John of God, serial rapist and faith healer, very heavily promoted by Oprah as well. In case you were a fan of Oprah. Anyways, we're just like rambling now.
It's really late.
It's really late. We should just make a podcast though. We just basically did.
Yeah.
So why not?
It's just a matter of finding like what topics to talk about.
Yeah, I mean,
also you're the one between the two of us who is more vigorously doing research.
Yeah, that'll be the podcast. It's just I come on and rant about the stuff I've been reading.
Yeah. But it'd be good. Yeah.
I mean, I feel like making this knowledge that is only available in these academic books that maybe people don't want to read openly available to the public is like a public good.
That is the thing, yeah, is like a lot of this stuff is available for those who want to like read, but not everyone wants to do all that reading, and especially
This
in
might be
academic
impossible
language,
already.
which
Shut the fuck
can
up,
be
Twitch.
droning. Uh, like it takes a certain mindset to want to read an academic article.
Yeah. Well, to be
So
fair,
having it in podcast form
to be fair, a lot of the stuff I've
would
been reading
make it more public.
is not academic articles. It is books, and
Yeah,
most of
true.
them are written with a public mindset. They do not shy away from being academic in nature, but they also are written in a way that is a lot more accessible than what you're probably thinking right now in your head. Thundersticks is a perfectly readable book. You do not have to be an academic to read Thundersticks, or Saltwater Slavery for that matter.
But you do, however, have to want to read.
Yeah, and you have to want to read like 300 pages.
Yeah.
Saltwater Slavery is more like 200, but yeah. You have to be willing to do that.
Yeah.
And it's not something everyone is willing to do, especially considering that, like, in this conversation, I referenced specifically 2 books, but like I've also been referencing other books, like that the details about the Ice Age or the land bridge that was coming from. What was the name of the book? It's by Alice Kehoe. It is America Before European Invasion. Or is it Native America Before European Invasion? Either way, it's something like that. Alice Kehoe. It's like I'm referencing like several books all at the same time here, whereas people don't really necessarily have time to read several books to get an understanding of the topic. But I also can't just like go on here and read the books, because if I just make an audiobook out of the books, that is infringing on copyright. Yeah. I have considered doing that for like public domain stuff though. It might be fun. I don't know. Anyways,
fair enough.
Let's fucking end this goddamn thing.
It's very late.
Haru, where can people find you? It's been 2 fucking hours. We gotta do this again.
You can find you can find me on Twitter, where I mostly do stuff. That's where I mostly exist. You can find me on YouTube, where I have 2 series going on, as well as where I upload my VODs. And as for non-YouTube exclusive series, I stream on Twitch, which is here, this website.
I'm going to be streaming on Sunday and the next Sunday, and that's basically it. You'll find me playing Yu-Gi-Oh or whatever. We're waiting for Pokemon basically. You can find me !socials in chat. You find me on Twitter, where I post funny hahas, Facebook, where I post when we're going live, YouTube, where I post all the VODs, including this one, some edited highlights I've been making, lots of deck profiles for Yu-Gi-Oh, also a Let's Play series. I post music videos. I do all sorts of shit. Go subscribe to my YouTube channel, please. You can find, if you are a fan of MBT, you can find my video with MBT on there. Go check it out. It's fun. You'll also find my Patreon, where you can contribute on a monthly basis, my tip link, where you contribute on a one-time basis. Give me some money for that VTuber model. Let's go. You can find my Throne wish list if you want to give me a gift, and you can find my TCG Player affiliate link, where you can get any single sealed product and accessories that you need, all while supporting the channel all at the same time. But if you can't afford to do so, please do not do so. I will be fine, I promise. Additionally, you can join the Discord. Haru and I hang out there all the time. We try to.
Yeah.
I post stuff there. It's just join the Discord so we have people to talk to, please.
Yeah.
Haru hosts watch parties. It's fun.
I am hosting watch parties. Yeah.
You're hosting one soon.
I should actually get on planning for when that's gonna be, but I am. It'll be in like a week or two,
Yeah.
probably.
So yeah, join the Discord. But yeah. Uh, I think that's everything. It's been
Yep.
2 hours of close up. I'm fucking tired. It's 4 a.m. It's past 4 a.m. Go to fuck to
Let
sleep.
let's let's get you into bed.